What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And with this last circus, we did see people breaking insane speed records in all of AQ, but we also see a lot of people breaking new records in overall damage and overall boss damage. Now today I do want to break down the new overall video of the best overall boss damage throughout all of AQ, which is again just Wu with 905 DPS. He released the video of this and I'll link it in the description. But before I get into it, I do want to mention to you guys that, of course, doing this much DPS, 905 DPS overall to all of the bosses is insane, but it's extremely hard to do unless your guild is pretty much focused on parsing. And he could have done a lot more even because he actually gets slept on Huhuron. So a lot of speedrun guilds are going to get really close to this or possibly here, but to get extremely high up on these boss damages, you do actually want to be running more of a parse run than a speed run so that you have CDs up for different bosses. And I'll of course go into all of that as we move on, but I'm going to break down all of the strategies he uses for getting the most DPS possible out of each encounter. But with that being said, my name is Sarth, of course, and let's get right into it. Alright, so let's dive right into the video itself. The first thing I want to look at are what are all of his buffs that he's using, and the interesting ones that I want to mention to you guys is he already has a nature protection potion and a arcane protection potion. This is just basically for safety. If you're doing a parse run on this fight, you probably are going to see slightly less kicks on the actual arcane explosion, so having a pre-pop of a greater arcane protection is going to be extremely useful. He also does have the 2% hit food buff from the Fire Festival, and he's using a Winterfall Firewater instead of a Juju. And the reason why a lot of people are using Winterfall Firewaters in this raid, even though it's 5 less attack power, is it makes you slightly larger, which slightly increases your hitbox. So your Blade Flurries can range slightly further, which is very useful in this raid. A lot of cleave fights in here. Moving straight on in, they are all mounted initially, which is going to be very helpful in getting a good parse because you can get to the boss faster. He gets Slice and Dice up, and then he's pretty quickly going to use Adrenaline Rush, Blade Flurry, and his Blood Fury. The scary thing about Blade Flurry is you might cleave your friends. As you can see, Dardre got MC'd here, but you're just going to see Wu move out of the way. You do want to use Blade Flurry on this fight. If you do notice that somebody gets MC'd near you, make sure you just move away from them so you don't cleave them down and kill them. But it is very useful to use. He still hasn't used his Renatakis or his Thistle Tea, as you can see, and he will eventually use those. There's the Renatakis, and soon will be the Thistle Tea whenever he gets low on energy. And the boss is pretty much blown up so fast that there's the tea right at the end, but there's a little bit of wasted energy, and there's nothing you can really do about that. That right there was a 799 DPS fight. He gets 1.2k damage off on actual cleave. Some of it was on the warrior, but it is still useful to use that ability. And a very standard thing to see in the logs is a little bit of downtime in such a short fight of any DPS, and that's usually the first split, because the boss kind of disappears on that first split and you can't actually do anything most of the time. He does use Goblin Sabotage, which is another thing I do want to mention, that, guys, it's just a little bit extra damage, and it actually hit all 3 mobs. None of them crit, but it hit 3 mobs, so it's very useful to do if you're just going for that little bit extra damage. The next fight is obviously the Bug Trio. The biggest thing here is cleave. And one thing I forgot to mention right at the beginning with the buffs, he does also have True Shot Aura. If you do have a hunter in your group, that's just going to help you out. In general, it's so nice, but you initially want to get your Slice and Dice up and then your Blade Flurry and Adrenaline Rush. You want to be pumping this as hard as you can. This is a good fight to potentially use double on-use trinkets. You do want to do a Sapper. As you can see, he does a huge Sapper charge, and he's going to get a 5-point Eviscerate that crits and hits both of these. If your tanks stack the Bug Trio really well, you're going to do so much more damage than if you actually spread them out. If you can do as much damage in your cleave phase right there. he's using his PvP trinket on this fight, and that's basically for the fear, because he is an orc, not an undead, and even with Tremor Totem, sometimes you can just be faster by getting out of the fear by yourself, and he uses FAP. FAP on this fight, free action potion, because these bosses can do a stun, and if you get stunned, you're losing out completely on all of that uptime of DPSing, especially if it's during your cleave or your burst phase. Then he's just going to get Slice and Dice back up, keep things going as they kill them. Also, you can notice that his tanks do a really good job of keeping them stationary. This is pretty massive. Everybody's pretty much grouped up. It looked like there's somebody out there, right there, but them can just charge anyone at any time. So you can rotate taunts. If your tanks are really good at keeping them stationary, you're going to keep your massive uptime on the boss, and it's just going to be pretty much huge. So on that fight, he did 1569 DPS. You do see the Sapper charge that only actually hit 2 of the bosses, but both of those crit, which is pretty huge. And more of his damage was from Blade Flurry than from Sinister Strike itself. He got 29% of his damage from the cleave, so he had pretty much perfect uptime on cleave, which is the best way to really pump this fight. And there's a little bit of downtime right here in DPS, and that's basically when he was running over to Vem. And like I mentioned earlier, if your tanks do a really good job of keeping Vem stationary, then you can cut this time down. So we're probably going to see in the next circus him do even more damage in this long of a fight. The next boss is Battleguard Sartura. And this actually isn't his 100 parse of Battleguard Sartura. His best parse on Sartura, he actually opened with a cheap shot into a Sinister Strike, into a Renatakis, into a Vanished cheap shot, and with Blade Flurry up the whole time. So he actually was stunning that time, and this time going in, Wu actually is not stunning. So you can see he's initially using Blood Rage, and he's gonna just go in out of stealth, use Evasion. Evasion can dodge all of these knockbacks and all of these spins. You're gonna see that there is a kidney shot there, so the group does a really good job of stunning everything until it's dead, and he does get pretty much full uptime on cleave. Sprint to get in on the boss. His evasion is gone now, but he's just gonna lip, and they're always gonna stay in. So take a little bit of damage from some of the whirlwinds and just keep pumping the boss as much as you can. Use your lip, and then when he stops, hopefully someone stuns him, and that's that. It's really good to be swords in this fight because swords can just position in between 2 mobs a lot better to get that Blade Flurry cleave off. Sometimes things can be a little bit too spread out for daggers to pump as hard. He does 1266 DPS here, and of course the evasion is the big thing you want to do as the mobs are all together initially, and then the lip during Sartura itself. Fankris is a pretty standard fight. They waited for Adrenaline Rush, but in most guilds you probably won't have Adrenaline Rush for this fight. But it's just a normal rotation. Use literally all of your cooldowns, and that's it. Use all of your cooldowns. If you have a Sapper backup, you can use a Sapper unless you need to save it for Visitus, but do everything you can to just pump it as fast as possible. And he did 1.7k DPS there. There's nothing really tricky here. Now, like I mentioned earlier, he actually skips over his Huhuron fight because he got slept, and even with the sleep, the full duration sleep, he still did get the overall best boss damage in the world, so you're definitely going to see this increase, but we'll move right on to the Twin Emps. One thing you might notice is he actually doesn't have poisons up. He actually does have a sharpening stone there. It appears right there. So he does have a sharpening stone up. You do want to swap to a sharpening stone for this fight because it's immune to poisons. He uses all of his CDs in the first phase before the boss teleports, and the big reason for this is it's the longest amount of time you have fighting the boss pretty much in the entire time. Then he's going to use a swiftness potion to rotate initially. Unfortunately, he gets hit by that blizzard, which is just something that you can't really avoid. That was just a random blizzard, but then he just gets back in, starts DPSing the boss again, Slice and Dice back up, and here they're all going to usually Sapper because the Scarab is right on top of the boss. So that's just an easy thing to do, get a Sapper up, and as the boss is about to rotate, he's either going to build combo points or go for a big eviscerate. So we're going to see right here, he's going to stay in, go for a big eviscerate, and try to get one more attack. And he does actually get 2 combo points back up. A good thing here is he uses sprint next. A lot of times rotating on this boss, you can use slice and dice early, right before you get to the boss or in range of the boss, right before an energy tick, so that you actually maximize your uptime of slice and dice and energy. So as you saw right there, he uses slice and dice right before the energy tick when the energy he had was at 88. And so he gets the slice and dice off, and then the energy tick goes out, and he's already using a global right away on the boss. So there's no wasted globals here. He has yet to use Thistle Tea, but he also hasn't gotten down to really low energy. And right there, that's where he actually does use his Thistle Tea, because he actually gets a Crusader proc and he gets all the way down to 18 energy. So he goes for the big 5-point Eviscerate again, which is just a massive pump on this fight because it crits again. And then he renews Slice and Dice here. The teleport is about to happen, and he doesn't have any movement speed abilities anymore. He's still using Ground Scorpack Ashe, but if your fight is a little bit longer, you can actually use the Swiftness of Zanza, but it's nice to have the Ground Scorpack all the way through the entire raid. And instead of doing a Slice and Dice there, the boss is so low, all he does is go for that 5-point Eviscerate. So there's a lot of times when you want to choose between going for a Slice and Dice or an Eviscerate. And if the boss is so low, you can just choose to go for that huge Eviscerate. It's going to do more damage for you overall because you're not going to have a full uptime of that Slice and Dice. So just do a big Eviscerate at the end. On that fight, if you look at the logs, he does 809 DPS, and you can see all of the biggest damage was in that initial burst phase where he uses all of his cooldowns, and then he actually gets a little bit of Blade Flurry damage, which is just from the Scarab that was right on the boss. And the fight is too short for them to use actually 2 2-minute CDs, so you only see 1 use of Blade Flurry, which is actually ideal. If you can kill this boss faster and there's only 4 rotations, if there's only 3 rotations, or even 2, that is the best you can do, because the downtime between moving between the boss is gonna cut down your DPS no matter what, especially after you use your movement speed abilities, like your Swiftness pot and your sprint, but do use both of those. The next boss is Ouro, which is a boss where you have a little bit of choices, and we're gonna see what he does here. Gets his 2-point Sinister Strike, gets his Slice and Dice up, and then he's probably going to use all of his CDs. There we go, right? All of his CDs right away. Blood Fury too, so he's not too scared about taking damage, and you can evasion the knockback on Ouro. If your tank is really good with threat, and your off tank is really good with threat, then you're not worried about anything. You can evasion the knockback, and if there's only going to be 1 knockback, you could also lip it, because you don't have a 100% dodge chance most likely, so you could also use a lip to not get knocked back, or a FAP to not get knocked back. If your guild is going to get knocked back multiple times and you're close on threat, you could vanish the first one, or you could actually FAP the first one and run in front of the boss and take the damage of the Sandblast, which will drop your threat but not stun you at all, and you don't lose any uptime. If your fight is longer, you have Vanish, you have Lip and FAP, and you also have Evasion. So he uses Evasion on this, and I think they're going to kill it before it even does a second Sandblast. So let's just watch really fast. All of his CDs are already used, and that's the big one that you want to make sure you don't get sandblasted with. Okay, so for this second sandblast, he's actually going to vanish it. See, as he vanishes the sweep right as he gets a 5-point Eviscerate off also. If your tanks are good, this boss is a very simple fight for rogues, and he ends up 1.6k DPS, evasions the first one, and vanishes the second knockback. If there was going to be a third one, he would have used a lip or a FAP. And the last boss, Cthulhu. A very helpful thing on this boss is to be swords. It's very frustrating to be daggers, because if you have bad RNG and the eyeball is looking directly at you all the time, then you're not going to have very good uptime on your backstab. You're only going to be using a lot of Sinister Strikes. So swords is a massive advantage here on Cthulhu for phase 1 specifically, mostly for phase 1 and the in-between phase actually. So right here, he wouldn't be able to backstab. He uses his Blood Fury and his Blade Fury, or Blood Rage and his Blade Fury, because this is a longer fight. You're gonna have your 2-minute CDs back up. He also uses Renataki's, as you can notice in this initial burst phase, and he's actually gonna swap. Oh, perfect, right there. He's gonna swap to Blackhand's Breath. Between phase 1 and phase 2, there's actually a combat drop, and you can swap your trinkets. So if you're gonna go really fast and you're not gonna have Renetakis back up, you might as well swap off your trinkets. If you have Earth Strike or Jom Kabar, that will be back up in time no matter what, but you can swap off your trinkets. You're also gonna see right here that he swaps off his ZG shoulders for his Night Slayer shoulders. He doesn't have tier 2.5 shoulders just yet, so he switches off to the next best thing, which is the Night Slayer shoulders. It's just a little bit of min-maxing. And swords, again, right here on the giant tentacle, this is another position where swords is more ideal because it's a lot easier for you to actually DPS the actual tentacles because you actually get closer to them. Like, it's harder to run around and get to the back side of them than it is to just run right up to them and start sinister striking. So you have more uptime there. It's a slight thing, but it is actually helpful for your DPS overall. And now once the boss is weakened, you're gonna see he's gonna use Adrenaline Rush right away, get a Slice and Dice back up, and he's pretty much just pumping. He's gonna have Blade Flurry come back up, and he also just uses his Thistle Tea when he gets low, and it's actually probably gonna be a waste of energy to Blade Flurry this low. The boss is gonna die so fast, he might not have needed to use Blade Flurry there. But other than that, that was extremely, extremely clean. Super easy, and you can see his Shaman was weaving, and it's very, very helpful for a horde group and super easy for shamans to just weave totems, especially on phase 2 of Cthulhu, because there's nothing else they really have to do. On this fight, he did 803 DPS, but this is just a standard breakdown, guys, of all of the strategies you can use if your guild is either parsing or a little bit of the strategies you can use if you're not fully parsing, but you want to min-max as much as you can. Thank you guys all for watching. I was going to do a different video, and there's actually a couple really exciting videos coming next week. So if you like any of my content, make sure to like and subscribe. There's going to be some very different things next week that I'm going to break down for you guys. If you want to come hang out with me on Twitch, I do stream myself at twitch.tv/Sarth, and I'm currently not streaming for the next 2 weekends, but just come in and join the Discord, which is in the description, to see when I am streaming. I've got some real life things going on these next 2 weekends. But again, dude, huge damage from Just Woo. Bipolar is insane at these parse runs, and Just Woo has always been pretty much the best rogue at these parses. So this video link will be in the description. Huge congrats to them, and I will see you guys all on the next one.